I watched my fiancé kiss another woman at our wedding, in front of 200 guests, in my wedding venue, while I stood 3 feet away in my wedding dress. And I smiled, because what he didn't know was that while he was planning to humiliate me at the altar, I was planning to take everything he owned. His restaurants, his money, his entire future. By the time he said, "I do" to her, he had already lost everything. This is the story of the worst day of my life that became the best decision I ever made. And if you stay until the end, I'll tell you exactly how I burned his entire world to the ground without shedding a single tear. Welcome to Reality Stories Hub. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. You know, there are moments in life that change everything. Moments that split your story into before and after. For me, that moment happened on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But before I tell you about the day my fiancé married someone else at our wedding, let me take you back to where it all started. I grew up in Seattle, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep our lights on. She taught me something important. Never wait for someone to save you. Build your own life. Create your own security. Those words became my foundation. They pushed me through late nights in community college, through years of starting at the bottom, through every door that slammed in my face. By the time I turned 30, I had built something I was proud of. I owned a photography studio in downtown Seattle. Not just any studio, but one that celebrities and wealthy families flew in to use. I specialized in capturing life's biggest moments. Weddings, anniversaries, family reunions. I had this gift for making people feel comfortable in front of the camera, for finding the real emotion behind the posed smiles. My business grew slowly, painfully, beautifully. I started in a tiny rented space above a coffee shop, just me and my camera. But I worked hard. I stayed late. I treated every client like they were my only client. Word spread. Soon, I was booking months in advance. I hired assistants. I expanded to a bigger location with natural light flooding through tall windows. I was finally stable, finally independent, finally proud of what I had created with my own 2 hands. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable. I had my own apartment with a view of the water. I had a car that didn't break down every week. I had friendships that felt real and work that fulfilled me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had earned my place in the world. That's when he walked into my studio. His name was Derek. He owned a chain of high-end restaurants across the Pacific Northwest. The kind of places where reservations were impossible to get and every dish was a work of art. He came to book a session for his restaurant's anniversary campaign, and from the first moment, he was charming. Confident but not arrogant. Successful but seemingly humble. He had this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room. Our first date was simple. He took me to one of his restaurants after closing, cooked for me himself while telling stories about learning recipes from his grandmother in Portland. The food was incredible, but what caught me was how he listened. When I talked about my business, my dreams, my mother's sacrifices, he didn't just nod politely. He asked questions. He remembered details. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. We fell into a relationship that felt natural. Morning texts before my shoots. Surprise lunches delivered to my studio when I was too busy to leave. Weekend trips to the San Juan Islands where we'd walk on empty beaches and talk about everything and nothing. He wasn't perfect, nobody is, but he felt real. Solid. Like someone who understood that love wasn't just romance, it was partnership. His world was bigger than mine. Business dinners with investors, charity events for children's hospitals, grand openings where politicians showed up for photo opportunities. But he always included me. He'd introduce me as the woman who reminds me what matters, and I'd feel this warmth spread through my chest. Pride. Belonging. Hope. His family seemed to welcome me too. His younger brother called me his future sister at Thanksgiving. His father praised my business sense. His mother smiled and hugged me, though sometimes I'd catch her watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. But I told myself I was being paranoid. Love makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability makes you see shadows where there's only light. When he proposed, it happened during a photo shoot. I was working with a couple at Golden Gardens Park, capturing their engagement photos during golden hour. He showed up unexpectedly, walked into my frame, and dropped to one knee right there in front of my clients, the sunset, and a handful of strangers walking their dogs. I said yes, of course. What else could I do with everyone watching, cameras already recording the moment? But even as I felt the ring slide onto my finger, something felt off. The ring was beautiful, expensive, flashy, but it wasn't my style. I'd always loved simple, meaningful jewelry. This felt chosen for how it would look in photos, not for how it would feel on my hand. Still, I pushed that feeling down. I told myself I was being ungrateful. I told myself every bride feels nervous. I told myself this was just the beginning of our forever. I had no idea that forever was about to become the shortest promise anyone had ever made me. Over the next few months, as we planned our wedding for a vineyard in Woodinville, I started noticing small things. Strange things. Things that whispered warnings I didn't want to hear. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, you need to understand how deeply I believed in us. How completely I trusted him. How thoroughly I had woven my future around a man who was already planning to destroy me. Because that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send you a warning letter. It builds quietly, behind your back, wearing the mask of love while sharpening the knife it plans to use on your heart. Planning a wedding should be exciting. That's what everyone tells you, right? It's supposed to be this magical time where you dream about flowers and music, and the moment you say, I do. But planning my wedding felt different. It felt heavy, like I was arranging something for someone else's life, not my own. At first, I blamed it on stress. I was running my studio, managing clients, and trying to plan a wedding. Derek kept saying he wanted to help, that he wanted to surprise me with special touches. But his surprises felt more like secrets. And secrets, I was learning, have a weight you can feel even when you can't see them. He became protective of the wedding venue in a way that didn't make sense. The vineyard was beautiful, rolling hills and sunset views, but whenever I wanted to visit to check on setup or meet with the coordinator, he'd make excuses. Trust me, babe. I've got it handled. You focus on your business. It sounded thoughtful. It felt like a locked door. Then there were the phone calls. Late at night, he'd step outside to take them. Through the window, I'd watch him pace the driveway, his voice low, his hand gesturing in ways that looked frustrated or excited. I couldn't tell which. When he'd come back inside, I'd ask casually, "Everything okay?" And he'd kiss my forehead and say, "Just restaurant stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." But I was worrying, because the phone calls were increasing, because his business trips were lasting longer, because when I'd try to reach him during the day, he'd take hours to respond, then explain he'd been in meetings. Meetings that somehow never appeared on the shared calendar we'd created months ago. I started noticing other things too. Small details that alone meant nothing, but together painted a picture I didn't want to see. A lipstick stain on his car seat that wasn't my shade. A woman's hair tie on his bathroom counter that definitely wasn't mine. A receipt from a jewelry store for a purchase made 2 weeks after he'd given me my engagement ring. When I asked about these things, he had answers ready. Too ready. The lipstick was from giving a friend's wife a ride. The hair tie must have been from his cleaning lady. The jewelry receipt was for his mother's birthday gift. Each explanation sounded reasonable enough that questioning further made me feel crazy, suspicious, like I was the problem. But then the wedding vendors started mentioning her. It started with the florist. I stopped by to confirm the final arrangements, and she said, "Oh, I already went over everything with Vanessa last week. She had some great ideas for the second arrangement." I stood there, confused. "I'm sorry, who's Vanessa?" The florist looked equally confused. "The other bride? The one helping with planning." My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. "There's no other bride. Just me." The florist's face went pale. She stammered something about mixed-up orders and rushed to the back room. I left with my hands shaking and my mind racing. Then the caterer mentioned her. Vanessa approved the menu changes. The musicians mentioned her. Vanessa requested the special song. The wedding coordinator mentioned her. Vanessa visited the venue yesterday to check the seating chart. Vanessa, a name I'd seen once before, months ago, on Derek's phone. A text message that had flashed on his screen while we were having dinner. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." When I'd asked who Vanessa was, he'd barely looked up. Business contact. New restaurant investor. Why? I tried confronting him, but gently, carefully, not wanting to seem like the jealous fiancé. "Derek, vendors keep mentioning a woman named Vanessa. They think she's involved in our wedding planning. Do you know anything about that?" He laughed. Actually laughed. "Babe, you're stressed. Wedding planning is getting to you. Vanessa is helping me with a surprise for you. Can you just trust me? Can you let me do something nice without interrogating me?" His words made me feel small. Paranoid. Unreasonable. So I stopped asking. But I didn't stop noticing. A week before the wedding, I found a text thread he'd forgotten to delete. I wasn't snooping, I swear. His phone was on the kitchen counter, lit up with notifications, and I glanced at it while passing by. The preview showed a message from Vanessa. Can't believe we're almost there. One more week until I become Mrs. Crawford. Mrs. Crawford. Derek's last name. My heart stopped. My hands went cold. I picked up the phone with trembling fingers and opened the thread. Message after message of intimate conversations, future plans, expressions of love. Photos of them together at his restaurants, at the vineyard, in places I thought were ours alone. And then I saw it. A photo of a wedding dress. Not my wedding dress. A different one. And Vanessa's message underneath. Do you think everyone will be shocked when you choose me instead? The room spun. I sat down hard on the kitchen floor, phone still in my hand, reading through months of messages I'd been too trusting to see. He hadn't been planning surprises for our wedding. He'd been planning a completely different wedding. With her. At the same venue. On the same day. In front of all our guests. He was going to humiliate me. Publicly. Deliberately. At the altar. I should have cried. I should have screamed. I should have called him right then and torn his world apart with my voice. But I didn't. Instead, something cold and clear settled over me. Something that felt like steel forming in my spine. If he wanted to destroy me in front of everyone I knew, then I was going to make sure that when I fell, I wasn't falling alone. I was going to take him down with me, and he would never see it coming. That night, after reading those messages, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a notepad, and a clarity I'd never experienced before. Heartbreak, I learned, can do two things to you. It can break you into pieces, or it can forge you into something harder than you were before. I chose the second option. First, I called my best friend Rachel at 2 a.m. She answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. This better be an emergency. It is, I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears. Calm. Too calm. I need you to come over. And I need you to bring coffee. We have work to do. 20 minutes later, Rachel was sitting across from me, listening as I showed her the messages, explained about the vendors, laid out everything I'd been too blind to see. She didn't say, I told you so, even though I knew she'd had her doubts about Derek. She just reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said, What do you need me to do? I need you to help me remember everything. Every document I've ever signed. Every business dealing Derek and I have had together. I pulled up files on my laptop, searching through folders I hadn't looked at in months. That's when I found it. The thing that would change everything. 6 months earlier, Derek had been facing a lawsuit. One of his restaurant managers had accused him of financial misconduct, and while the case was eventually dismissed, during that time Derek had been panicking about protecting his assets. He'd come to me late one night, stressed and vulnerable in a way I'd rarely seen. I need your help, he'd said. I need to temporarily transfer some business assets to someone I trust. Just until this lawsuit blows over. Someone they won't look at, someone completely separate from my business dealings. I'd been hesitant. Derek, I don't know anything about restaurant ownership. That's exactly why it works. You're not connected to any of this. Please, baby. I trust you more than anyone. He'd pulled out paperwork his lawyer had prepared. Transfer documents for shares in his restaurant group. 40% of his entire company, transferred to my name temporarily. I'd signed them because I loved him, because I wanted to help, because I believed we were building a life together, and his problems were my problems. But here's what Derek didn't know. After the lawsuit was dismissed and he'd asked me to sign the shares back, I'd gone to consult my own lawyer first, just to make sure everything was legal and proper. And my lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia who'd helped me with my studio's business contracts, had said something interesting. These shares were transferred legally and completely. If you sign them back, that's your choice. But legally, right now you own 40% of his company. That makes you a major stakeholder. That gives you rights, power, voice in business decisions. At the time, I'd thought it was just interesting information. I'd planned to sign the shares back anyway because we were getting married, and what was his would be mine, and what was mine would be his. Right? I never got around to signing those transfer papers. Life got busy. Derek never pushed. And now, sitting at my kitchen table at 3 a.m, I realized I still owned 40% of everything he'd built. But I needed more than that. I needed to understand exactly how much power I had. I called Patricia at 8 a.m, as soon as her office opened. I need to see you today. Emergency. And I need you to bring every document related to Derek Crawford's business that you have in your files. By noon, I was sitting in Patricia's office, and she was walking me through my options with the careful precision of a surgeon explaining a procedure. With 40% ownership, you have significant say in major business decisions, Patricia explained. But it's not controlling interest. You'd need 51% for that. My heart sank. So I can't actually stop him from doing anything. Not by yourself, no. Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying me. But here's what you can do. You can call for shareholder meetings. You can demand financial audits. You can vote against major decisions. And if you can convince just one other shareholder to side with you, someone with even 12%, you'd have majority control. Who are the other shareholders? I asked. Patricia pulled up a document. His younger brother owns 20%. His father owns 15%. Various investors own the remaining 25% in smaller chunks. His brother, the one who'd called me his future sister, the one who'd always seemed kind, genuine. I pulled out my phone. What are you doing? Patricia asked. I'm going to find out if Derek's family knows what kind of man he really is. I met Derek's brother, Tyler, for coffee that afternoon. I didn't tell him everything, not yet. I just asked careful questions. How's Derek been lately? He seems stressed. Tyler had sighed deeply. Honestly, I've been worried about him. He's been acting strange, secretive, making weird business decisions without consulting anyone. Like what? I'd asked. Like trying to take out a massive loan against the restaurants without board approval. Like trying to transfer assets around. Dad and I have been concerned, but Derek won't talk to us. I took a breath. Tyler, I need to show you something. But first, I need you to promise you'll hear me out completely before you react. What I showed him that day in the coffee shop, Derek's messages with Vanessa, the proof of the double wedding, the pattern of lies, made Tyler's face go from confused to angry to heartbroken in the span of minutes. I can't believe he'd do this to you, Tyler had said quietly. To anyone. Will you help me? I'd asked. Tyler had looked at me for a long moment. Then he'd nodded. Tell me what you need. The morning of my wedding, I woke up before the sun. Not because I was nervous or excited, but because I was ready. Ready for this to be over. Ready to face what was coming. Ready to show Derek that underestimating me was the biggest mistake he'd ever made. My bridesmaids arrived at my apartment at 7, champagne and pastries in hand, expecting to find a glowing bride. Instead, they found me already dressed, makeup done, sitting calmly on my couch like I was waiting for a business meeting. Rachel pulled me aside. Are you sure you want to do this? We can leave right now. We can skip the whole thing. I shook my head. No, I need to be there. I need to see his face. The drive to the vineyard in Woodinville felt surreal. Rolling hills covered in grapevines, the autumn sun painting everything golden. It was beautiful, exactly the venue I'd dreamed of for my wedding. And it was about to become the place where my life split completely in two. Guests were already arriving when we got there. Friends, family, colleagues from my studio, business associates of Derek's. Over 200 people, all dressed in their finest, holding programs with our names printed in elegant script. They smiled at me, hugged me, told me I looked beautiful. None of them knew what was about to happen. I stood in the bridal suite, looking out the window at the ceremony space. White chairs arranged in perfect rows. An archway covered in flowers. And there, at the altar, I could see Derek in his tuxedo, checking his watch, looking toward the parking area, waiting for someone. Then I saw her, Vanessa, walking across the lawn in a white dress. Not a bridesmaid dress, a wedding dress. Different from mine, but unmistakably bridal. She was carrying a bouquet. She was wearing a veil. And she was walking straight toward Derek like she belonged there. My hands should have been shaking. My heart should have been breaking. But instead, I felt that cold clarity again. The same feeling I'd had when I first found the messages. Steel in my spine. Fire in my chest. Absolute certainty in what I was about to do. It's time, I said to Rachel. Are you sure? She asked one more time. I've never been more sure of anything. I walked down the aisle alone. My father had passed away years ago, and I'd planned to walk by myself anyway. But now it felt symbolic. Powerful. I wasn't being given away to anyone. I wasn't anyone's property to transfer. I was walking toward my own future, and that future didn't include Derek Crawford. Every head turned as I appeared. I could hear gasps, confused whispers. Because there, standing at the altar next to Derek, was another woman in a wedding dress. 2 brides. 1 groom. The math didn't make sense to anyone watching. I kept my eyes on Derek as I walked. His face went from confident to confused to panicked in the time it took me to reach the front. Vanessa looked smug, almost triumphant, like she'd already won some competition I didn't know we were having. When I reached the altar, the officiant looked completely lost. I don't understand. There seems to be some confusion about. No confusion, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the silent crowd. Please continue with the ceremony. Derek, you should probably tell everyone which bride you're actually here to marry. The crowd erupted in whispers. Derek's face went red. You weren't supposed to. I can explain. Oh, I think everyone would love to hear your explanation, I said, stepping aside and gesturing to him and Vanessa. Please, explain to our 200 guests why there are 2 brides here today. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Vanessa like she might save him. But she was looking equally panicked now, realizing that this wasn't going according to whatever plan they'd made. Finally, Derek made his choice. The choice he'd apparently made months ago. He turned to Vanessa, took her hand, and said to the officiant, I'd like to marry this woman. The crowd exploded. People stood up. Someone screamed. Derek's mother burst into tears. But I just stood there, watching, waiting. The officiant, clearly wanting this nightmare to end, rushed through the shortest ceremony I'd ever heard. And then Derek signed the marriage papers. Right there, in front of everyone, he signed legal documents binding himself to Vanessa. That's when I took the microphone from the confused wedding singer. Congratulations, I said, my voice steady and clear. I have a wedding gift for you both. I pulled out an envelope from the hidden pocket in my dress. Derek, do you remember 6 months ago when you transferred 40% of your restaurant shares to me? For safekeeping during your lawsuit. His face went white. Well, I never signed them back to you, which means I still own them. And yesterday, with the support of your brother Tyler, who owns 20%, we held an emergency shareholder meeting. Together, Tyler and I have 60%. That's controlling interest, Derek. That means we own your company. The silence was deafening. As of yesterday afternoon, you have been removed from all leadership positions. Your salary has been terminated. Your access to company accounts has been frozen. And every restaurant you thought you owned, we're selling them. All of them. Vanessa grabbed Derek's arm, her face horror-struck. What? You said you were rich. You said you owned everything. He did, I said, looking directly at her. Until about 18 hours ago. And here's the beautiful part. You just married him. Which means all his debts, all his legal problems, all the lawsuits that are about to come from his financial misconduct. You're tied to those now too. Congratulations on your marriage. I set the microphone down gently and walked back down the aisle, my head high, my heart finally free. The weeks after the wedding were strange. Everyone wanted to know what happened, how I was doing, if I needed anything. The story spread fast. Social media exploded with photos from the ceremony, the 2 brides, Derek's face when I revealed what I'd done. Some people called me a hero. Others said I was cruel. I didn't care about either label. I just cared about moving forward. Derek tried to reach out. Dozens of messages, voicemails, emails, all saying the same thing in different ways. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Please, we can fix this. I love you. But love doesn't treat you like that. Love doesn't humiliate you. Love doesn't build a secret life behind your back. So I blocked his number and focused on rebuilding my own life. The legal aftermath was messy but satisfying. Derek's restaurants were sold to a restaurant group from California who kept most of the staff but completely removed Derek's name from everything. Tyler and I split the proceeds, and I walked away with enough money to expand my photography studio into something I'd always dreamed of. Vanessa left Derek 3 weeks after the wedding. Apparently, marrying a man with no money, no business, and multiple lawsuits wasn't the fairy tale she'd imagined. I heard through mutual friends that she moved to Los Angeles and blocked Derek's number too. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Derek's mother reached out to apologize. We met for coffee one morning, and she cried as she told me she'd suspected something was wrong, but hadn't wanted to believe her son could be so cruel. I appreciated the apology, but I didn't need it. Her son's actions weren't her fault. And honestly, I was too busy rebuilding to spend energy on anger anymore. With my share of the restaurant sale, I opened a second photography studio, this one in Portland. But I also did something else, something that felt more important than any business expansion. I started a nonprofit organization that provides free professional photography services to women leaving difficult relationships. Headshots for job interviews. Family portraits to help them rebuild their sense of identity. Even wedding photos for second chances at love. I called it Second Exposure. Because everyone deserves a second chance to be seen clearly, truly, beautifully. The work filled something in me that I didn't know was empty. Every woman who came through our doors, nervous and hopeful, reminded me of my own journey. We weren't just taking photos. We were documenting their strength, their survival, their courage to start over. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, I was doing a photo shoot for Second Exposure when I met James. He was volunteering at the community center where we were working, helping set up chairs and equipment. He was quiet, kind, the type of person who helped without needing recognition or praise. We started talking during a break. He asked about my work, really asked, listening to my answers like they mattered. He told me about his job as a teacher, about how he spent his free time volunteering because his sister had once needed help leaving a bad relationship and strangers had shown her kindness that saved her life. "I'm just trying to pay it forward," he said simply. We started seeing each other casually. Coffee before work. Walks around Green Lake on Sundays. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. Just two people enjoying each other's company without games or hidden agendas. After Derek, I'd promised myself I'd never ignore red flags again. But with James, there weren't any flags to ignore. Just green lights. Just ease. Just someone who showed up when he said he would and meant what he said. A year after the wedding, Rachel and I were having dinner at a restaurant that used to be one of Derek's. It had been completely renovated, the new owners turning it into something brighter and more welcoming. We were laughing about something silly when Rachel suddenly got serious. "You know what I'm proud of?" she said. "What?" "That you didn't let him make you bitter. That you didn't let what he did poison how you see the world." I thought about that. I think I realized something after everything happened. Derek didn't break me because I never belonged to him in the first place. I belonged to myself. And you can't break something that was never yours to begin with. Rachel raised her glass. To belonging to yourself. I clinked my glass against hers. To belonging to yourself. My life now looks nothing like the life I thought I was building with Derek. It's smaller in some ways, quieter, less flashy. But it's mine. Completely, authentically mine. My studios are successful. My nonprofit is growing. I have friends who show up when I need them. I have work that matters. And I have someone, James, who treats kindness like it's the baseline of a relationship, not something I should be grateful for. Sometimes people ask if I regret going through with the wedding, showing up that day instead of just disappearing. The answer is no. Because facing Derek, exposing his betrayal, taking back my power in front of everyone who thought they knew our story, that healed something in me. It proved I didn't need to hide or run or collapse. I could stand in the middle of my worst moment and still choose myself. The vineyards where we were supposed to get married? I drive past them sometimes on my way to Portland. They don't hurt to look at anymore. They're just beautiful hills covered in grapevines, holding no power over me, no memory that can touch me. Because here's what I learned. Betrayal will show you who you are. And I learned I'm someone who doesn't break. I bend, I adapt, I survive, but I don't break. And that knowledge, that certainty about who I am when everything falls apart, is worth more than any wedding, any ring, any man who couldn't see my value. I didn't just survive Derek's betrayal. I used it to build a life that's bigger, stronger, and more beautiful than anything I could have imagined while standing at that altar. And that, more than any revenge, is the sweetest ending I could have asked for.